To win its competition with the Chinese regime, the U.S. needs friends and allies.
There is only one other country in the world which has as many people as China does, and has a large military, and is a rival of China, and is a country against whom China has committed aggression multiple times, and that is India.
Beijing has been advancing on its Asian rival.
Unless India is able to stop China, there will be more peaks that India will not be able to control. And so in the long run, it will be a problem.
What's the Chinese Communist Party's strategy for outwitting India? And what challenges lie ahead for Beijing? In this special report, we dive into the wrestling match between the two giants over borderland in the Himalayas. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. For years, Beijing and Washington have been circling each other in a delicate, highly strategic dance. As the communist regime works to infiltrate democratic countries and exert its influence across the globe, the U.S. continues to counter it. For China, part of that strategy means taking a less direct route, targeting America's friends instead of straight on. Today, we look at how Beijing is advancing on one of them, India. The country is among China's biggest obstacles in the Indo-Pacific. It's not an easy one to contend with, given its large population, level of technical development, and friendliness with the U.S. So to deal with India, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is using one of its go-to tactics. That is, gnawing away at the rival country's land bit by bit. But using this strategy in the Himalayas has proved challenging for Beijing, and we'll talk about why in a moment. First, why is the power struggle between China and India critical for the United States?
US needs allies and partners in its competition against China, and there is only one other country in the world which has as many people as China does, and has a large military, and is a rival of China, and is a country against whom China has committed aggression multiple times, and that is India.
What's more, India is a major part of a region that will play a big role in America's future, the Indo-Pacific region.
The US strategy is the Indo-Pacific strategy. Indo itself means Indian. It refers to the Indian Ocean and India.
The Indo-Pacific region spans from America's west coast to India's western coast. And this region's stability is crucial to America's well-being. The U.S. is a Pacific nation and has 5 states bordering the Pacific Ocean: Hawaii, California, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. It also owns territories in the Pacific like Guam and Wake Island. A quarter of America's exports go to the Indo-Pacific, and America's annual trade with the region stands at over $2 trillion. The Indo-Pacific also hosts more than half of the Earth's population and generates 60% of the world's GDP. 6 countries in this region also have nuclear weapons. India is one of them.
So without India, you cannot have an Indo-Pacific strategy. You cannot have an Asia-Pacific strategy. You cannot have a counter-China strategy.
The U.S. sees India as a major defense partner in the region. American defense sales to the nation totaled over $20 billion last year. And last but not the least,
the U.S. strategy against China is one of democracies versus authoritarian rule. And therefore you need the world's largest democracy in your camp.
But how are India and China's power struggles playing out? Let's zoom back out to the Himalayas. For Beijing, its land-nibbling strategy isn't easy to push through on the Himalayas. That area is home to some of the world's highest peaks, and its altitude stands at well over 10,000 feet. And here's another tricky part. China and India don't have an official border. The contested issue goes back 60 years. In the 1940s, the Chinese Communist Party took over China, and India became independent from British rule. Since then, the two sides never settled on an official border and even went to war over disputes. Even after a truce, there was still no official border negotiation. The two sides instead set up a buffer zone to divide the two countries and ease the tension. Though the unofficial border didn't spell the end of the argument.
It's not that simple. It's a 2,000-mile long border, my friend. It's not 5 inches. It's not 1 mile. It's 2,167 miles in mountainous area, which is covered by snow 6 months of the year.
What makes the unofficial border even more complicated is that it tends to move. The landscape features snowcaps, rivers, and lakes, so the unofficial border can shift depending on natural conditions. So how does a country expand its control of a difficult border like this?
You need to be able to hold the valley or hold the peak.
She explains that because the border area is so cold and frigid, it's challenging to station troops there all the time.
So you build infrastructure so that some troops can stay there and man it, but it is primarily manned or will need to be manned by electronic or drone surveillance, right? And it is too high up there. So you can have patrolling take place. Your troops go, patrol an outpost and come back. Now that is what traditionally happened.
And that's how China and India have been consolidating their control over the unofficial border. Both sides have been building up infrastructure like airstrips and roads. They also have been sending troops to patrol the region. Despite the challenging geography, Beijing has been working to change the status quo.
What China is trying to do is, instead of your troops going patrolling and coming back, it is trying to actually build infrastructure so that the troops can stay there.
But in the past decade, tensions have flared several times over the unofficial border.
And each time it's mainly because China is trying to take over additional territory and change the ground reality in parts where it believes it needs to bolster its own defense.
In 2014, Chinese troops tried to build a road inside Indian territory. In response, Indian troops set up a camp nearby. Chinese forces later withdrew. China and India faced off once again in 2017, but 3 years later, clashes between the two turned deadly. In 2020, Chinese troops again entered India's claimed side of the unofficial border. A fight broke out. India lost over 20 soldiers. Beijing says it lost 4. A months-long standoff followed. Right now, the two sides are in the process of pulling troops out. They just had their 12th round of talks this August.
In the last skirmish which took place in 2020, India did lose some territory, in the sense that India can no longer patrol one or two of those peaks, which is a problem. Going ahead, unless India is able to stop China, there will be more peaks that India will not be able to control. And so in the long run, it will be a problem. It's not a problem right now. The question is 10 to 15 years from now, what is going to be? Not immediately.
Pandey says India does have an option.
India would have to continue to build its military infrastructure, its roads, highways, airports and helicopter pads on that high altitude, and invest more in its troops.
As the two nations grapple with the border situation, Beijing appears to have been trying to outwit India through other means. That is, by eating away at territories belonging to a mutual neighbor, Bhutan. Bhutan is a Buddhist kingdom sitting on the edge of the Himalayas. It's slightly larger than the size of Maryland. Recently, China has started building villages on Bhutan's territory, establishing roots there in just a few years. News outlet Foreign Policy reports that right now, Beijing has built 3 villages, 1 military base, 2 Chinese Communist Party administrative centers, and 5 police outposts. What does that infrastructure have to do with upping the pressure on India? To understand this, let's take a look at the map. Bhutan is in a unique situation, stuck between China and India. Based on the Chinese Communist Party's actions, it appears that what Beijing really wants is a section of land located in western Bhutan. Beijing has already built a village there, and Chinese officials have said that if Bhutan hands over that western land to China, Beijing would release its claim to land in the north. But what's so important about this piece of land in the west? If Beijing gains control of the area, it would give the regime an edge in its military competition with India. That's because the area is only 60 miles from one of India's weak points, a narrow strip of land that connects most of India to its northeastern state. The strip is called the Siliguri Corridor. Military strategists call it chicken neck. And India has long feared that China could seize the neck and cut off the bulk of India from its northeast. Beijing's efforts to nibble away at other nations' land may be a slow process in the Himalayas, but the tactic appears to function much smoother in the South China Sea. The South China Sea is a body of water sitting between China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Multiple neighboring countries claim parts of the maritime territory, but Beijing claims most of the area. And it's wasting no time in taking control of the waters there. Without existing land to build patrol outposts on, Beijing is using coral reefs instead and turning them into artificial islands. In just 2 or 3 years' time, Beijing has turned a number of these disputed reefs into military bases, armed with bunkers, airstrips, and missile silos. Right now, Beijing controls the Paracel Islands in the west and the Spratlys in the south. It also controls the Scarborough Shoal in the east. Last year, the Chinese regime stepped up that control. It set up 2 administrative districts on the Spratlys and the Paracels, even though Vietnam also lays claim to these islands. And on one of the islands inside the Paracels, Chinese troops have successfully grown vegetables like cabbage and lettuce. These vegetables are meant to feed the forces stationed there. Pandey says America should stay alert when it comes to Beijing's course of action.
The fact that China can continue to commit aggression across multiple borders, across multiple areas, whether it is land or sea, at a time when most other countries are still recovering from the pandemic, shows that Chinese military strength should not be underestimated, and they've actually managed to build up a lot of it, and that's something which the Americans should bear in mind.
She says even though the U.S. spends more money on defense than any other country in the world,
but sometimes quantity matters more than quality does. If you have more men to throw, literally meaning more troops, or you have more equipment, which China does, then it will sooner or later also challenge the Americans.
China currently controls the largest army in the world, followed by India and the United States. To watch today's full special report about China, India, and the U.S., click the link in the description down below. We are working with Epoch TV, and all Friday special reports are published there in full length. Now, we turn to today's daily news, 996, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. This is common among many Chinese technology firms, but maybe not anymore. China's Supreme Court has taken aim at overtime work policies. Ryan Cheng reports.
China's top court is cracking down on 996. That's what some call the work culture of encouraged overtime common among Chinese tech firms, meaning working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. On Thursday, the court and the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security published guidelines and examples on what constitutes overtime work. Some companies jumped ahead of authorities. ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, formally ended its weekend overtime policy on August 1st, 2 weeks after its rival Kuaishou announced a similar decision. The court and the ministry's criticism of hustle culture at tech giants also comes amid wider regulatory crackdowns in China on a range of issues, from monopolistic behavior to consumer rights. Backlash against 996 bubbled up in 2019 when a group of programmers and coders launched an online protest against the practice. Some coding platforms became home for workers to swap stories of excessive overtime demands at their companies. In the same year, Chinese state media said 996 violated labor laws, which mandate an average working week of 44 hours. Though for some companies and employees, working 996 is a badge of honor. And Silicon Valley heavyweights like Sequoia Capital's Mike Moritz have labeled it a competitive advantage for China over the United States.
The fight against the 996 culture started in 2019. A community GitHub launched the 996 ICU project, meaning if you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. in 6 days a week, intensive care unit is your future. But Alibaba's founder, Jack Ma, once said that working 996 is only called for when there's something worth fighting for. In that case, he said 996 is a great blessing. His comments sparked even more controversy. In one court case over work-life balance, a courier company had required its employees to work 996 in their contract. But when one worker refused, the company fired them. The employee sued and won. The company got an official warning and has to pay compensation for violating the legal contract. A woman was reportedly caught for selling her newborn to a medical company. The case suggests a child trafficking network, and some say it's just the tip of the iceberg.
A young woman is allegedly being charged for selling her own baby. Multiple outlets reported a police release on Wednesday saying the woman sold her newborn to a medical pharmaceutical company in northern China. Some reports say she's a surrogate mom. The police said the woman admitted her guilt and that she earned a little more than $10,000. The news shocked many. Rather than accusing the mother, more people are questioning, why does the medical tech company buy babies? A comment online asks, is it for the baby itself or for its organs? Is testing on animals not enough for them? What experiments are they doing? The police and other official media outlets soon deleted their news release. They kept the medical company anonymous. But according to Chinese media follow-up reports, people dug up the company's name and other data. It's reportedly based in eastern China's Weifang city and focuses mainly on reproductive health. The company is now reportedly being investigated for illegal surrogacy and baby trafficking. According to Chinese media outlet The Paper, the crime was exposed after a year-long undercover investigation by a civilian volunteer.
Authorities have arrested nearly a dozen Epoch Times supporters in China. The detainees had provided the U.S.-based newspaper with first-hand footage of the pandemic as it was spreading in China. The U.S. State Department has since sent a statement to the paper condemning Beijing's move. NTD's Don Ma has more.
The Epoch Times first-hand reporting on China is often dangerous work. 11 Chinese citizens were detained by Beijing authorities for giving photographs to the Epoch Times. These photos show what the early days of the pandemic in China and Beijing's draconian lockdown restrictions looked like. In a statement to the Epoch Times, the State Department said the U.S. urges Beijing to release the citizens who reported on China's COVID-19 restrictions and cease their efforts to silence those who report the truth. The 11 individuals are not journalists working for the Epoch Times. They are adherents of Falun Gong and voluntarily offered the photos to the newspaper. They've been detained since July 2020. Falun Gong is a spiritual meditation practice. It's currently banned in China. The Chinese regime launched a brutal persecution campaign against it in 1999, despite its widespread popularity in the country before that. Authorities initially accused the individuals of using a heretical religion to sabotage law enforcement. An indictment in April also accused them of taking photos and uploading them to overseas websites. One of the arrested is Ms. Xu Na. Her defense lawyer says the charges are unreasonable.
These citizens care about the public's welfare. They took some photos of the pandemic situation and shared the information. This is a legitimate action by citizens, but they were arrested and prosecuted. This is very similar to the Wuhan Dr. Li Wenliang incident. It's the same idea.
Dr. Li Wenliang was one of the earliest Chinese doctors to warn the Chinese public about the CCP virus, but he was reprimanded by authorities for what they called spreading rumors. Mr. Xie also says the arrests by authorities are arbitrary.
For the aforementioned reason, the authorities found there is no way to make a case out of it, so then they play the Falun Gong card for Ms. Xu Na. What kind of logic is this? As long as you are Falun Gong, you are guilty. As long as you are Falun Gong, they can arbitrarily detain, arrest, try, and unjustly imprison you. This is their logic.
In a tweet, another of Xu Na's lawyers expressed frustration about the arrest, saying, "And all that for merely capturing the most common moments on Beijing streets during the pandemic. What kind of country is this?" A friend of Ms. Xu says she doesn't understand why Ms. Xu was arrested.
I think Xu Na acted justly and should not be prosecuted. I know Xu Na well, and Xu Na is a very kind person.
A New York-based group that advocates press freedom, the Committee to Protect Journalists, also condemned the arrests. A statement reads, China needs to stop trying to prevent its citizens from reporting the news and publishing photographs about its COVID-19 restrictions. An Epoch Times spokesperson expressed concern about the detainees' safety. They said, "We call on the international community to condemn this violation of press freedom." Don Ma, NTD News.
On Friday, Japan and Taiwan held their first ever security meeting. A major topic of the meeting is China's increasing military pressure against the two countries. The meeting is the first of its kind because China has always objected to other countries having official interactions with Taiwan. But recently, China's increased military assertiveness has left Japan feeling uneasy. The island nation is now on heightened alert for threats to its very survival. The meeting lasted around an hour and a half. The two sides discussed defense and security issues in depth. A Taiwanese legislator said both sides had grave concerns about the growing military challenge from China, including the Chinese warplanes and warships in waters southwest of Japan and the area southeast of Taiwan. The Japanese delegate suggested even more cooperation between Taiwan, Japan, and the United States. Japan initiated the meeting, and China repeatedly objected. On Friday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry warned Japan to be cautious about its actions. It claimed that Taiwan is China's territory, but both Japan and Taiwan expected Beijing to oppose. The Taiwanese legislature says Taiwan is an independent country.
Taiwan, as a sovereign and independent country, has the right to promote bilateral and multilateral ties with all countries. More importantly, even if the two sides face possible pressure from China, both sides can promise to express their strong willingness and hope that such a dialogue will continue.
The two sides also talked about possible collaboration in the semiconductor industry. The world's largest chipmaker, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, may be opening a facility in Japan. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.